We rolling? Hello and welcome to a GCN live video on YouTube. I'm joined by the man formerly known as the boss, Dan Lloyd.
Formerly? Does that mean you're formerly the brick?
I hope so. Fingers crossed, hey? We are not, however, joined by Simon Richardson. And Dan, you've got a few thoughts on why that might be.
Yeah, Simon has been quite stressed the last few months, but we've not allowed him to take a break. This week, however, he is on holiday, and there is a good reason for that, because finally, take a look in here. Look what's arrived. No way. The infamous GCN red water bottles, which came by a boat, not via air, are here.
All the way from China, Taiwan, came straight here by boat, not by air, which was, I think, Bottlegate video did determine, like you say, that was Simon Richardson's fault. So we're giving him the week off while you lovely GCN fans receive these. I understand that there might be a few technical issues. One of them might be that you can't hear what I'm saying, but we are going to be answering all of your cycling questions. So any cycling questions, do let us know down in the comments. This looks all right. Okay, we'll keep going. So, Dan, you posted a tweet out just before we got started, and one of the questions was, what is the best way to train to lose weight while cycling? I'm going to give the mic to you.
Yeah, we've done a few videos actually on the best ways to lose weight through the sport of cycling, and handily, being an endurance sport, it does make it reasonably easy to lose weight. One of my favourite ways was always to go out before breakfast, not for too long, around about an hour and a half, only once, maybe twice a week. That seemed to rev the metabolism up, and that was pretty good for losing weight. Just watching your diet though, really, one of the good things about endurance sports like cycling is that it allows you to indulge in things that perhaps you wouldn't normally indulge in. However, don't go too overboard with that, because if you indulge too much as a reward for doing some long, hard rides, then it might be that you just maintain exactly the same weight. But Larsie's right, yeah, we did put the tweet out around about 10 minutes ago to say that we would be doing this YouTube live, so we did get a few questions initially back in. What happens to all the musettes and the bottles that the riders discard during the races? That came in from Ben Wright.
They are generally picked up by... I was going to say hungry. They're not hungry because they're empty, but they're picked up by cycling fans along the roadside, which is good because ideally we don't want, cycling is a green way to get about, and littering seems like not a particularly green thing to do, but luckily you cycling fans do tend to pick up most of that stuff.
Oh, that wasn't me. That was Tom Last's phone vibrating. Yeah, they've often got green zones in races these days, which is a short section of road which the organisers set aside, and there's a mark at the beginning and a mark at the end. And at that point, the riders discard things like bottles and anything that they've got in their back pockets that is litter. And later, someone will go along and pick it all up so that they're not littering the countryside, which is a great bit of progress, because we have often seen on the TVs over the past few years, for many, many years in fact, riders discarding gel wrappers and bar wrappers, etc., which is never nice to see. But Larsie's right, and the majority of the time it's the general public who stand just after feed zones, etc., pick up the musette. It's always a good memento. Before we get on with the next question, I'm going to do a shameless plug, because tomorrow I have the privilege of meeting up with none other than Sir Chris Hoy at the Velodrome in London. Now we're going to be doing a couple of videos with him, including a live Facebook video and also a live Ask GCN Anything. Not live, actually, a recorded Ask GCN Anything. So that is your opportunity on two separate videos to get your questions to one of the legends of track racing, a 6-time Olympic gold medalist. So you can leave questions for Sir Chris Hoy beneath this video as well, or there is a post over on our Facebook page, facebook.com/Global Cycling Network, which features the legs of myself and Chris Hoy next to each other. Leave your questions below there, and I will pose the best ones to Chris this time tomorrow.
And actually another semi-shameless shout-out, but Dan, we've mentioned the red bottles.
Oh, yeah.
What we have not mentioned, however, is... Well, we have mentioned these bottles before. You can win these every week in the GCN show. What is this?
Right, well, these clear bottles, as you mentioned, Tom, are given away to the caption contest winner each and every week on the GCN show, which incidentally will be out fairly shortly. And we said that they would never be for sale. They are now for sale in a combination clear hydration pack, along with this, which is a new addition to shop.globalcyclingnetwork.com. As you can see, it is a pint glass. Rather strange at the moment, it's filled with water, but I've got to drive home later, so I had to be a good boy and not have any beer. But this is going to take pride of place for me at home in the evenings, I'm sure, in the not too distant future, if I can get my hands on one, because they are in limited supply.
Yeah, they are on sale in the GCN shop, shop.globalcyclingnetwork.com, from this evening, I believe, for £14 for the hydration packs. Bargain. Next question, Dan, we have got one from Dean Terry, who is saying, what is the best way to ride on wet leaves? And if you're in the southern hemisphere right now, this may not be an issue for you because you're probably not in your autumn or your fall, and it's possibly also heading towards warm rather than cold and wet. But for us in Britain and in Europe and in America, it is a problem. Dan, what's your advice?
Yeah, it is a problem at this time of year. Beautiful whilst they're still on the trees, very slippery once they reach the ground and they come between your rubber tyres and the tarmac beneath. Same kind of technique really as for any other slippery surface, whether that's some mud off-road or wet roads or drain covers or whatever that might be. You cannot afford to lean the bike over so much, and braking distances are going to be significantly farther than they are normally. So you just have to be extra cautious really. Take your time going around the corners, don't push things too far, and especially do your braking before the corners, because if you have to touch your brakes through them, then the likelihood is that your wheel might lock up and you're going to be hitting the deck pretty quickly indeed. So just be careful really is the main advice when you're riding on slippery roads with lots of leaves. Tree Frog Gaming was one of the first to write in fact, and he or she put, what is the fastest you have ever been on a bike? I'm going to answer first because I'm quite pleased with my fastest ever speed. 116 kilometres per hour I managed once on a very, very straight descent somewhere on the Austrian border of Italy, I think it was.
111 kilometres an hour.
Yes.
I wanted to say 117 just to upset you, if I'm honest, Dan, but I decided to do the right thing and tell the truth. Next up, Nepox has asked, turbo trainer or rollers? And Dan's just scouting for a few more comments and questions now, so I'll answer that one first. And I think they each have a different role. A turbo trainer is definitely something for a brutally hard training session, whereas while rollers, you can do a hard training session on rollers, generally they're a bit easier, they're a bit better for recovery, spinning your legs over or warming up. And also they're really good for skill development. So I'd say, if possible, have both. If not, go for a turbo trainer.
Yeah, I would agree. Turbo trainers, in my opinion, much better for an actual training benefit. But you do still see loads of track rides, don't you, warming up on rollers. Good skill to have. Not as easy as it looks, as we proved with Matt Stevens this time last year, in fact, where I taught him how to ride the rollers. And I'm not an aficionado by any stretch of the imagination, so they're not easy. They're quite good fun to ride the rollers, aren't they? Because they mean that you have to concentrate on what you're actually doing rather than the pain in your legs. But yeah, if you really want to go hard, they don't offer that much resistance unless you get some of the new special ones. Some people behind the scenes not acting particularly professionally here at the moment, but we should continue on with our questions anyway. In fact, I think we're only going to do 20 minutes on this YouTube live today, so you're going to have to be reasonably quick if you want to ask us any questions. Jovin Yo, what should I eat before riding?
Something you like eating. Toast or cereal or something like that. Something that is not going to be too heavy on your stomach. Nothing too hot or spicy, too greasy. Just something normal and relatively plain so that you don't see it again if you go hard up a hill.
Yeah, I think kind of timing is almost as important as actually what you eat. Gone are the days when the riders used to eat a steak a couple of hours before a very big race. Now they tend to focus more on kind of oatmeal or porridge and maybe an omelette and eggs of some description too. I remember at the start of the year, Chris Froome tweeted a picture of his breakfast before the Herald Sun Tour, I think it was, that he won. I think I'm right in saying that. And he was on a low-carb day, apparently, so all he had was poached egg and a whole avocado, if I remember correctly. Tell me. You can tell me if I'm wrong. We did have a question in on Twitter, which I shall get to in just a moment, from Bobbert. Who can drink the most beer on GCN?
It's not Simon Richardson. It's definitely not Simon Richardson. It's probably not me. That leaves two people. Dan, you or Matt? Put him on the spot.
Yeah, I don't know what to say. Should we go on to the next question?
We'll go on to the next question. Just on the steak point about the breakfast, I think people actually stopped eating steak for breakfast before bike races quite early on in Matt Stevens' career, which shows just how outdated that is as an idea. I like this one from Phil M, who has asked us about what are the best climbs in Mallorca. And I think wherever you are in the world, Mallorca is, without a doubt, one of cycling's meccas, isn't it? Cycling in Mallorca is fantastic. The roads are amazing. So thousands of cyclists go there every year. For me, my favourite climb on Mallorca is probably... I really like the climb to Luc Monastery from Pollença, just because it's not too big, but it's just, you can get a nice rhythm on the climb. It's a nice road, nice gradient, nice length.
Yeah, I probably like one of the climbs around the Sola area. They're quite short and they were loads of hairpins, which also always make it feel like you're doing a lot more climbing than you actually are. Be very careful though if you go over at this time of year or in the spring. Those roads are like ice when it rains. Andreas Clear, former pro rider who now lives in Mallorca, claims it's because of the olive trees. Not entirely sure, but regardless, he is right. It's so slippery, possibly even more so than ice. I almost came to grief a couple of times a few years ago when I went for a training camp there. I'm going to plug something else actually now.
Okay.
On the GCN show, we've got a new segment called Crimes Against Cycling, where your confessions come in. And some of them have been really very funny indeed. We're doing one each week. I've got my own confession now from Mallorca, which is what reminded me about it. So, in my first ever training camp abroad, which was probably in about 98 or 99, I was with a load of army lads from the Army Cycling Union, and they persuaded me to go to the other side of the island to compete in a Pro-Am race. So there were a couple of Kelme riders in the race and a whole bunch of amateurs. Anyway, we started off and I was on a rally bike because I was a mountain biker at the time, and about 50 k's in we went down a kind of gradual descent at around about 60 k's an hour. I went down to my 53 by 11 and my chain got caught between the 11 sprocket and the frame. And it had happened a few times before, I just hadn't fixed it. So I stopped by the side of the road and I couldn't get the chain from being wedged between the sprocket and the frame. It took me so long that all of the team cars came past, the ambulance came past, and the broom wagon missed me and went past as well. And at that point, you know, before the days of mobile phones and GPS, etc., I had absolutely no idea where I was on the island of Mallorca. I'd only been there for about 3 days. And so I carried on thinking maybe there's some road signs about where the race is going. Couldn't find any. Eventually, a local rider came coming up from behind, and we didn't speak the same language. He only spoke Spanish, I only spoke English, but he kind of gestured, follow me. So I did, and we kind of pootered along, and we did about 5 or 6 Ks, and then he just said, okay, stop here. So we stopped, and then about 30 seconds later, the peloton came across the road that was in front of us. So we just joined in the middle of the peloton, and thankfully I managed to make my way to the finish without actually competing in any way, shape or form, whilst the other rider who'd taken me on that shortcut was withdrawn by the commissaires. So that is my crime against cycling confession. Sorry.
Yeah, I think that leaves us no doubt, Dan. Guilty. Absolutely guilty, even though, you know, like you said, by not competing in the closing stages of the race, that maybe kind of makes it a little less bad.
I think so.
And you needed to get home as well, so there is that. Moon Huang, can bumpy roads damage a carbon fibre bike in any way? No, not unless it's already damaged, in which case you should try and avoid riding it on bumpy roads, or any roads in fact. You should take it to your shop and get a warranty.
Yeah, carbon bikes are incredibly resilient in the way that they need to be, so for riding the bike. So they'll even be used, the standard frames, quite often in races like the Tour of Flanders. They will change frames slightly for something like Paris-Roubaix, but that's generally not because of strength. That might be more because of cushioning or the amount of clearance for the bigger tyres, etc. So carbon frames can withstand an awful lot of abuse on general road riding and cobbles, etc. It's only when they're hit in the wrong direction, maybe on the top tube, etc., that they're not very strong.
But yeah, if you think Fabian Cancellara, Tom Boonen and the whole professional peloton have now for years ridden carbon fibre frames over Paris-Roubaix, which is about as brutal terrain as you can get, and they've survived just fine. Karen Beer Singh is asking, have any of GCN ever done a triathlon? I have never done a triathlon. Oh, we have done a triathlon. Dan, Matt and myself did the first ever GCN Presenter Challenge, which was a triathlon of sorts, which Dan, you won. I was second because no one really wanted to lose to Matt in that situation.
By default, because of Matt's swimming.
It was by default because of Matt's swimming, also Matt's mechanics. And what was the other event, Mike? So there was
swimming, mechanics push, and inner tube.
Okay, yeah. So you had to fit an inner tube, you had to put a front wheel in, and you had to swim. None of them are strengths of Matt.
No. But I think that actually, of the four of us, Matt is the only one that's done a competitive triathlon. He's got rather a funny story about that, which might well appear in Crimes Against Cycling at some point in the near future.
Yeah, crimes of some sort.
Yeah.
Okay, Eric Bowen is asking, Dan, what is your favourite beer?
Probably Quaremont, because I like the taste, and it's also very cycling related, and they sponsor a lot of bike races. I'm always quite keen on companies that put a lot of money behind cycling.
That actually links into the next question I was going to ask, which is from Warren Lynch, who would love to go and watch a professional race. Have you got any good suggestions? What would be your suggestion? And I think I know the race, so I'm going to ask, where should you go and watch it?
Yeah, you do know the race. It is the Tour of Flanders. The circuit has changed somewhat in the last few years. So previously, it used to finish after the Muur van Gerardsbergen and then the Muur van Eddie Bosberg, the Bosberg. Named after Eddie Bosberg, Eddie van Hooijdonk, I think I'm right in saying. Anyway, now it's on circuits that go around Oudenaarde, which is kind of the capital of Flanders, really, isn't it? So it goes up the Quaremont multiple times and the Paterberg. So if you go onto either of those two climbs, you're going to see not only the men race up there 3 times each, but you're also going to see some other races, including the women's, which I think is a World Cup for the first time this year. I think I'm right in saying. In fact, I think it's been World Cup before, hasn't it? But you get to see more than one race and all of the elite athletes and best athletes in the world, both male and female. So that's fantastic.
I was definitely very jealous of the fact that you, Si, and Matt got to ride ahead of the race on that day. It looked like an incredible race to go and watch.
Yeah.
Disc brakes or normal brakes for cyclocross from Carlo Bianca Lacroix. Disc brakes, I think, future-proof. Have you ridden in cyclocross, Dan? Ever?
Yeah, I came 13th in a round of the National British Cyclocross Series in about the year 1999. Out of, I don't know, 60, 70?
I think I was about 13th from last when I did the Matt Does Cyclocross big comeback race, or not even big comeback. Matt had never ridden cyclocross, so we took Matt to a race in Milton Keynes in Great Britain. It was on the course of one of the hardest World Cups of the year, and Matt and I both suffered a great deal. But I think you enjoyed watching the suffering.
Yeah, I certainly did. Actually, talking about great races to go and watch, you and I are both going in differing capacities to a great race to watch this coming weekend, the Coxada World Cup race in cyclocross in northern Belgium, right up there on the coast near De Panne. I'm really, really, really looking forward to going to see a World Cup cyclocross race. I was at Cross Vegas, but it has to be said the home of cyclocross really is in Belgium, and I've never experienced the atmosphere of a Belgian cyclocross race before, so I'm really looking forward to that.
And Dan may or may not be taking his his GCN pint glass to Coxada. Cheers. Nice swig of water there. Sorry,
I've got another question.
Okay.
It comes in from Scott on Twitter at the Mighty Welk. What's your worst cycling injury?
I have been really quite fortunate. I think I've hit my head a few times, but no one's noticed much of a difference. No, I've broken helmets, I've broken bikes, but most of my worst cycling injuries have been skin deep.
I have broken both collarbones. Neither of those were anywhere near as painful as fracturing my pelvis. That was awful. But also, at the end of the Tour de France, I had a skin condition called staphylococcus, which ended up creating big craters in my skin on my legs, and that was probably the most painful thing that I ever had, including the fractured pelvis. Kaylee Fretz has written in, no question, just wants a shout out. Hi Kaylee.
Hi Kaylee.
Tech God at Velo News. In fact, he doesn't do so much tech there anymore, but he's very helpful on GCN videos when it comes to finding new tech at the Grand Tours. What else have we got? I should probably say to you that we're going to do another 5 minutes now on this YouTube live. And so we're going to call a halt to it in around about 5 minutes' time. So if you've got any questions, make sure you do so fairly quickly. I'm going to go over here from Facebook, Simon Kerr. How low is too low for cyclocross tub pressure? I run mine around 20 psi, but I occasionally get the sensation that the tub is trying to roll as the sidewalls flop over while cornering. Too low. In fact, Lars is going to be the person to answer this question for you.
I haven't really used tubs for cyclocross because I haven't raced for quite a while, but I would say that a good range is probably, depending on your weight and your riding style, maybe between 18, 19 up to kind of 30-ish. If you find you don't have enough grip at 18 psi, you probably need to have a slightly grippier tub, or just accept that the conditions are really muddy and really slippery, so you're not going to have a lot of grip. And like you say, if you're a bit uncomfortable with how your tyres squirming around a little bit, maybe it's worth putting another psi or another point of a bar in there. Dan, what's your favourite meal after a big race from C. Gats?
I was actually just looking at that question and thinking and not listening to your answer at all. because I couldn't really remember what my favourite meal was, and I'm not actually sure it would be any different to what it is now. I quite often liked having pasta after a race. You know, you got pasta all the time, but I never actually got sick of it. I could have had it every single evening of the year. Good old spaghetti bolognese in Italy or something like that, which is quite filling, but also has all the carbs that you need to replenish the glycogen stores.
Yeah, pizza or pasta. I like both. Or curry.
Right. Oh yeah, I'm getting a reminder from behind the camera that we must mention the Chris Hoy videos that we are doing tomorrow. If you've only just joined us on this YouTube live, we're going to do a Facebook Live with Sir Chris Hoy, the 6-time Olympic gold track medalist who has since retired, and also an Ask GCN Anything, which will be pre-recorded. So both of those are an opportunity for you to ask your questions to a true legend of track cycling. So make sure you get them in. You can do so by leaving them below this video or underneath the post we made yesterday on Facebook, Global Cycling Network. Facebook.com/Global Cycling Network, and we will ask the best ones to Sir Chris Hoy this time tomorrow.
Just while Dan finds a question, we'd also encourage you to head over to shop.globalcyclingnetwork.com, where you can get the clear bottle and the Dan Lloyd signature GCN pint glass, the Hit Clear Hydration Pack.
Right, I think we'll take 2 more questions before we wrap things up. SMLS BAM. Not sure whether you pronounce that differently. Is it worth putting cyclocross tyres on a road bike for the winter? Well, on the majority of road bikes, it's going to be reasonably difficult to put cyclocross tyres on because of the clearance factors. And in fact, that's one of the things that holds you back from using maybe 28C tyres. Frame manufacturers are starting to widen said clearance so you can get fatter tyres on, because the trend is to go to wider tyres for comfort, because they don't seem to increase your rolling resistance particularly. If you do have enough clearance to put cyclocross tyres on, I'm still not quite sure if it's really worth putting them on if you're just doing road riding. I don't think that having knobbles is actually going to make any more grip on a tarmac road. You're probably better off just putting some wider tyres on and riding them at a lower pressure. However, of course, if you are going to go off-road on your road bike for whatever reason, then yeah, put some cyclocross tyres on if you can fit them in. But bear in mind, if it's muddy, they're going to clog up pretty quickly. Right, last question. Have you got one up for us, Tom?
I have got one. Kaylee Fret said thank you for the shout out. That's no problem, Kaylee. And this one I like from David, or iDavid Who on Twitter, who has asked about carbon wheels, and we've already spoken about carbon frames. So he's saying, is it worth getting carbon fibre wheels if you're riding on poor quality roads? And I think the answer is yes. Dan, you might have a slightly longer answer while I think of the reasons I think you should ride carbon wheels on rough roads.
Yeah, you think of the technical reasons. I certainly don't think that they feel generally that much stiffer than some of the old box section rims that you used to have in years gone by. And I've certainly never felt that they were particularly bad when I was riding over cobbled roads on carbon wheels either. The majority of your absorption of bumpy roads is down to the pressure in the tyres. So if you want to have more comfort, stop sniggering, Tom. If you want to have more comfort, then you just run wider tyres at a much lower pressure, and you're not going to feel anywhere near as many of the bumps as you would do if you had 120 psi on 21C tyres. So I think that's us pretty much. Have you thought about your technical answers to this question?
Yeah. So the wheels are pretty much one of the most important components on your bike, and they're also one of the easiest to upgrade and change for different conditions. And I think carbon fibre wheels are good, like Dan said, because they match so well with wider tyres, and carbon fibre allows manufacturers to make many different kind of slightly wider shapes of wheel, and we definitely think at GCN that wider tyres are where it's at for the future, and many bike brands also appear to do so too. Should we do one last question, Dan?
Go on then.
You might have to go on there. I think that definitely can't read Bobbitt's question out.
Is it worth buying tubeless tyres if you're tired of replacing tubes? From David Benedict.
If you can go tubeless and you're tired of replacing tubes, it is worth buying tubeless tyres and investing in a bit of sealant, yes.
All right. Well, I think that brings our YouTube live to a close, is it?
There's one from Des White. No. Yeah, it's one from Matt Stevens, really. It's about how to unclip.
Unclip?
Yeah. What's the easiest pedal system to get out of? He did say it was one for Matt.
Okay. Well, a lot of pedal systems have an adjustability, which means you can make it harder or easier to unclip from your pedals. I'm not entirely sure which system makes it easiest to get out your pedals. Pretty flat pedals,
yeah,
I would imagine.
Behind the camera just suggested flat pedals. So there you go, Des and Matt, should you need that advice. That's about it. Don't forget to subscribe to GCN and give this one a thumbs up if you want to see more YouTube lives.